I'm Ted Elsner from the Sacramento Freifester, and today, as part of the April Challenge, we want to answer the question, I want to study Meyer. Where should I start? Now, probably the thing that you need to realize first when you look at Meyer is that all three of his sword weapons, his longsword, his dussack, and his rapier, are all using the same art. So they're the same system. Yeah, there'll be some differences within the weapon and the way that it handles, but at the end of the day, they're exactly the same. Longsword may be where you want to start. It's certainly the first section of the book, and it's where a lot of us are going to look to initially. But that doesn't actually mean that it may be the best place to work from by itself and the only place. So, my suggestion, if you want to learn Meyer, the first thing to do is learn the guards. This is what the longsword section will be great for, is starting to have a familiarity with the different guards, the different postures, where you're going to work from. At the very least, you want to develop that language. You want to start working on your posture. You can do this by yourself. So for instance, if we were to go and start into some basic guards, we can start, of course, with Vomtag, which in Meyer is an Oberhut position, nice and tall. Now, a couple of things we want to look at and we want to make sure that we're doing. First, get that stance nice and low. Extend that front leg, bend it, that back leg nice and straight. Lower stances are going to be really important to Meyer's art. One of the reasons for this, especially, is later on in the rapier, we'll see that all cuts are delivered at the height of the shoulder, your shoulder, and so if you want to be able to cut lower, you need to be able to extend lower. So practice this from the beginning. Start to strengthen those legs. Then if we go from there, we can step forward into ox, and that'll be the next posture. And again, keeping that stance with that front leg bent, that back leg straight. The toe pointed forward at your opponent, or even slightly out. Beware of the bending knee. That right there is a problem with the posture that we'll see in Meyer. You'll start to break your posture. You're going to show a lot of tells as you're moving about, so let's avoid that. Stepping again forward into the flu, or actually let's do a gather step into the flu. Yeah, let's gather forward into the flu. Maybe a little basic footwork. Nice and strong stance. Well prepared, and then finally into Alder, the Fool's Guard. There are plenty of videos out there that'll show you all the rest of the guards. Watch them, learn them, practice them. The next thing that we have in Meyer in his longsword section that'll be really useful for you to learn are the cuts. Now, the basic cuts we're not going to go into in detail here because, again, plenty of people have made videos out there on the internet to show you how to do basic cuts. But it is something that if you're working by yourself at home, you can definitely start from there and practice with. Another important thing, though, to start thinking about with those cuts is a basic concepts that we'll see from the longsword section. And one of them that's not fully mentioned, but that we see a lot will come into problems, is measure and the distance that your cuts should be at. So if Robert and Eric are paired off against each other, making sure we're in proper measure. Now, right now, with a single cut, Eric can't reach Robert, right? He's not going to get to distance, so he needs to move into measure with him. That's going to require that getting close enough to be able, with that single step, actually deliver a strike or a hit. Right? And now forcing Robert to parry. He's provoking him to parry. He's forcing that action because Robert does not really feel like getting hit in the head. Meyer's first section will talk about this a lot. He does a lot of actions outside of measure where he'll try and fool the person. He might start doing cuts from the Zufechten distance to kind of provoke the other guy to come into range. So something to think about, something to practice as you're doing your cuts is looking at those distance issues. But at the end of the day, that's all for the longsword. That's great. That's all there. You want to learn more? Well, that's now when we start looking at all three books. We're going to see drills. In the longsword drill, we have the most famous of Meyer's drills, and that is the cutting square, where he does the 4 cuts in succession, starting with a high cut to the upper opening, and then cuts to the lower right and lower left openings, and then one more high cut, and then proceeds through. Practice that. Plenty of videos online to watch for. Once you have that nicely down, turn to the dussack section, where Meyer provides several different drills that these can actually start to be set up for a pair drill, where we'll strike a succession of cuts and then provide a parry immediately afterwards. So if Eric were to start by cutting into long point, he then gathers back into a hanging guard position to then strike again with a gather step forward, and you can just repeat. We often affectionately refer to this drill when done in opposition as the Knights of Metronome, because you can do it where one person strikes, the next person defends, and so on and so forth. And we start to see this basic parry, riposte, attack, defense in measure. So let's go ahead and see that drill as Eric cuts in, Robert goes to the head guard, and then turns the cut, back, forth. Starts to force us to practice our parries, and then think about how to riposte, how to attack immediately back. A good beginner's drill, something to get used to, and you feel the blades. Thank you, gentlemen. After that, okay, and that can be done, I should mention, with the dussack as well. It's what the drill comes from, and it's going to work just great with the dussack as well. We can turn to the rapier, and we start to find even more complex cutting drills, such as the 6-cut drill. In the 6-cut drill, it's where we start to practice Meyer's cutting of the cross, where every attack is followed immediately by a cut in opposition to work as a parry. So if Eric were to cut in, his first cut comes across, then he immediately cuts back in opposition, cutting up and up, each one of those particularly defending, across and down. Cutting through, getting used to the patterns, cutting across every single time. It's going to be a really, really important feature in later techniques, is that you're immediately following up with a parry. So practice these by yourself, work on them. Once you're comfortable with all of that, now it's time for you to take these techniques and introduce tactics. And where should you start? Well, I'll tell you this right now, don't start with the longsword. It's probably the worst place you can start. We spin our wheels for a long time looking in the fighting from the postures from Meyer's longsword section, and confusion just results. Instead, turn to the rapier, and specifically turn to the section on the straight parry. From this point, Meyer is going to introduce a basic idea of having a strong on-guard position, practice a parry, and then riposte, a single-time counter, a first intention defense, if you will. From those actions, he'll then move on and start introducing second intention defenses, where he will parry, he will riposte, it will be set aside by the person who is attacking you, and then you'll follow around with the actual attack that's intended to occur. And then finally, he gets into second intention attacks. But let's just look at some of those first intention defenses first. So Eric will start in the straight parry posture. And from this nice strong parry, and it's not long point, right? It's not extended the cut fully to threat. Instead, the tip is up, the long edge is extended. If Robert strikes an overhow to Eric's upper left-hand side, or the right side, that'll work as well. Let's do that again and strike other side, just so that we have it for it. He strikes around. Eric simply is going to do an absence, and he's going to turn his long edge into the incoming strike. What he's certainly not going to do is raise his sword up and turn it across, not delivering a threat to the point. Just keep that point pointing towards Robert. From there, he will then be able to deliver a riposte. Now, when we put it in footwork, so reset back, and Robert attacks, Eric will step from cut to defend, and then riposte with a thrust for short edge strike. Okay? Let's do that one more time. This time just go through with it smoothly. 1 and 2. We get a simple, single time, first intention response. I should say double time, there's 2 different actions, but a single parry riposte action in first intention defense. Now, Robert sets aside Eric's riposte. So go ahead, he attacks. Eric riposte, Robert steps aside. Eric will use that momentum to cover around. Robert, let him get you. Do that one again. He attacks in. Robert, there we go, sets aside and strikes around. Now we've set up for a second intention attack, where the first idea is to thrust in his face. If that does not succeed, we don't stop, we continue around and we strike to the other side. The rapier section in Meyer is full of this, and it works equally well with longsword, dussack, rapier, and in fact, you'll find a lot of these plays in each of the different sections. They just sometimes can be hard to read. So for instance, Robert, deliver Unterhow at Eric's head. Eric will absets him, and then just riposte with a thrust. So Unterhow is lower left chin. A rising cut. No, upside. Oh, that'll work. And then thrust. One more time. Yeah, that's it. Chin and thrust. So that shows up in the rapier very early on as how to counter a cut from below. That exact same play, if Eric is in bomb hog, and try to get in his chin, and now strike with a short edge strike. I know. We'll cut that. Short edge strike, that's the second play from bomb hog. Right? It's the exact same drill that'll be done in both places, the same play in both places, just used with slightly different variations. In the longsword, they'll talk about it with a short edge strike. In the rapier, they'll use both a short edge strike or a thrust to the face interchangeably, or long edge strikes as well. Okay? So if you want to learn Meyer, if you want to start with his stuff and learn his system and learn his techniques, the longsword, The first half is great for just encyclopedia, but don't spend all your time there. Familiarize yourself with it, then move on to the drills found in all 3 books, and finally get yourself a partner and start practicing from the rapier in the straight parry. That'll be the best spot to start from.